All right, kids. We are live on StreamYard, live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube, live all over the place. Thanks everyone for joining us. Very excited to be here today. We've got an amazing panel. Sort of using Dom this as a way to sort of pivot from last week's Forrester conference and a little bit of feedback on what we saw and heard and sort of reflections there, but really kind of using that as a proxy for what's happened the first half of this year, this crazy beginning of 2023, and what it implies for B2B marketing and revenue leaders going into the rest of the second half of 2023.
Yeah, I think it's exciting time to checkpoint on the year. And I look at, we'll talk a lot about the Forrester B2B Summit last week rather. And, it's the largest gathering of B2B marketers in the world. And so just a bit of like what was talked about, what's the tempo, what's the conversation, what were some of the interesting things, what were some of the shocking sound bites, and get some reactions from some people that are in the job every day. I think it's an exciting time to pull together and checkpoint where we are in the year.
Awesome. Well, just a couple quick housekeeping things, then we're going to get right into it. We're going to make this as interactive possible. We got 3 amazing CMOs who are going to share with us today. As you can see underneath here, if you're watching us live and joining us live, you're going to be part of this as well. We're going to bring in your comments, your questions, and make you part of the show as well. My name is Matt Heinz, the founder and president of Heinz Marketing. Very excited to have as my co-host today, Domenic Colasante. He's the CEO of 2X. And Dom, thanks again for doing this. It was great to spend some time with you last week at Forrester, kind of comparing notes on what we're seeing out there and getting ready for this as well.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's both of our firms. We spend a lot of time talking to CMOs and looking at marketing trends and helping people do better marketing and execute all of the crazy ideas everyone has. It's good to be on this webinar with you, and great to have a conversation around how we practically do all of the things that we're hearing about in trends and different perspectives in the market, and then how does it actually come to life in the real world?
Well, let's get right into it then. I think maybe let's have our panelists let's do a quick, have them each introduce each other, who they are, where they're from, and then maybe what's one thing that you're thinking about here, sort of mid to late June 2023, that you think is going to impact your go-to-market motion into the second half of the year. Ladies first. Helen, let's start with you.
Hi, Helen Baptist from Brand Muscle. I was actually in person at Forrester, which was interesting because it was the first time I've been not as a sponsor. I was actually a participant and like what I would call fresh meat in the marketplace, with all the vendors chasing after me and things like that. But as I think about what's happening, I think that AI is everywhere, but I think that there's a broader perspective that we need to think about from AI, and I'm hoping to dive into that a little bit later with you guys.
Awesome. Always a pleasure, Helen. Kerry.
Hi, I'm Kerry Desberg, longtime SaaS CMO across a few companies. Probably, if I know any of you out there, it's probably from 7 years and a partner. And I'm just coming off a mini sabbatical where I just spent some time with my mom. Gift to do that, but lots of time to reflect on the marketplace and really dig in and experiment with some of the AI that is out there and affecting our world. And so as I come into this conversation, I would say the number one thing that I would encourage everybody to do is embrace your Borg. Right. If everybody is needing to tell you something and you're not telling them things about what's going on, then I don't think you're being aggressive enough to be a contemporary CMO today, because great messaging is not going to overcome a poor tech stack. A great tech stack isn't going to overcome poor messaging. So lots to do out there, and it's an exciting time to be a marketer.
Sure is. And Todd, as we get to you, for those of you that are watching, I want to throw the question to you guys as well. What is something that is on your mind here midway through 2023? What's a priority for you going into the second half of the year? Todd, why don't you round us out with some intros?
Yeah, sure. Todd Grantham. Nice to meet everyone here. And I'm a B2B CMO for a long time, SaaS and biotech, and thrilled to be in this kind of stage of the journey where you've got a good foundation of how to do this job, but at the same time, there's always this massive innovation curve that you're always kind of running on. It's what keeps our jobs so exciting, is that it's never boring, it's never repetitive. You're always kind of learning new things. And I think that's kind of my lesson, my concept that I'm taking in the back half of this year, which is always be ready to innovate, embrace the inner Borg, as Kerry says, but at the same time, don't forget the fundamentals. We have to always remember that innovation is a percentage of the total, not the entire thing. And you can't throw out all of the process, all of the learning, all of the fundamentals that you do, whether that be from understanding your brand truth and your category truth to understanding, how your audience works, and then using these tools additively on top of that process versus saying, oh, it's all new, we have to start over from scratch. I think it is such a brave new world, and it's coming so fast that it's easy to get caught up in the froth and get overwhelmed. So it's important to add it, but also be responsible about it as well.
It's interesting you say that. And Dom, I think we talked about this last week a little bit about, sort of strategy first, process second, technology third. And the technology, it's changing so rapidly. And I firmly believe the technology and data is replacing media as the coin of the realm in B2B, maybe has already and will continue to do so. But with new technology, sometimes we forget that pattern, right? We say, oh my gosh, AI, what's our AI strategy as opposed to what is our strategy? And how is AI going to support that? And I know, Dom, for the work you're doing with clients, really supporting that continued complexity of RevOps and the Rev stack, you're seeing that continued innovation firsthand.
Yeah, we are, and I think it was predicted years ago that the marketing department would spend more on technology than the technology department. And I don't know if I ever saw did that come to fruition or not, but it feels like it did, and it feels like marketing became a technology center, and a big part of our world is we know there's a shortage of people that really understand that technology, and we know that there's not enough certified talent in the marketplace, not only people not in their organization, but they're just they aren't in the workforce for a lot of the new platforms that are out there, and so we play a big role in helping to solve that problem. But I think we play a piece of the problem. And maybe one question I would pose to the panel is, one of the things that was talked about, maybe Kerry, I'd love to get your point of view on this. It was talked about in part of the main stage sessions was, as a marketer, technology is now like a requirement in how we execute our craft. But most marketers come from a background that's not technology. Most marketing leaders, most CMOs, most marketers are, their core skill is another area. And have you seen that as a CMO? Do you see that in your organization? And if you have, how have you sort of managed through a world where you need to be really good at technology, but that's not always in everyone's DNA in the marketing leadership layer and in the marketing organization as a whole?
Well, I absolutely have seen that, and probably heresy to say, but I don't think that a CMO of today is necessarily the same person that was a CMO 10 years ago. You may not have the highest aptitude, you may not be on the back end of Marketo programming every email, but in 2023, the best digital hunter wins. And you really do need to make a commitment to yourself to be aggressive in what it is that and not just because what somebody's telling you. Get your hands on the keyboard, pour yourself a glass of wine, make yourself a cup of coffee, and really invest in yourself personally to understand that, because the best jobs are going to go to the people who do have great. I mean, Todd, you're absolutely right? You've got to have the foundations. You've got to understand your markets. You've got to have strong messaging. But if you don't have that other piece, you're going to be behind. Your teams are going to be behind. You're not going to be able to fight for the money that you need at the table. And you're really not going to be able to explain that whole demand generation conveyor belt that runs your organization. You really won't be able to understand the people and the processes and technologies and be able to troubleshoot, be able to fight for the right money. So I do think it's critical, Domenic. I do see people falling behind and a different person emerging. And again, I wouldn't be afraid of it. Just make the commitment to do that, even if it's not your natural proclivity, or I do think you're going to be in big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I think, jumping onto that, I think it's key because there's so much innovation happening in so many different directions and dimensions. I think it's key for leaders to understand what's possible, understand it enough to know what's possible, and to know whether their org is delivering what's possible, and to push their teams to bring that capability in. So if your competitor has visibility to one piece of data, that gives them an advantage. So you as a CMO have to at minimum know that data set's available and possible, and push your team to do it. So whether it's your implementation, I think Kerry's got the right idea. If you don't have hands on keyboard in a certain number of in enough things to understand where the boundaries are, and then push them. Of course, your competitive advantage will come from taking that and say, okay, well, let's add this new thing in, or can someone go Tiger Team that and see if we can add that capability to give us even another dimension. That's where I think the key is. As CMOs, I think we have to keep perspective on the entire field and know where those boundaries are and where we can push it relative to our competitors.
I would also add that I think it's also dependent on the market maturity of the company that you're in and the market that you're selling to, right? So if you're selling to cyber security, they're probably very well versed in technologies, right? As opposed to some other industries that are not, and so won't engage in some of the technology solutions that we use as B2B marketers. And so I think it's, part of the strategy is to understand market readiness and employee readiness. I arrived at Brand Muscle and I'm being solicited by all the ABM platforms, and I've used a couple of them, and my team had 3,000 sync errors between Pardot and Salesforce, right? So we don't even have core blocking and tackling. And so I'm not ready from a maturity perspective for some of those things. And those markets some of those markets that we sell to are latent markets. They are, the old boys club. Not to be gender specific, but it's an old boys club of selling, and there are industries that are never going to buy the way that B2B sells. And so we have to think about the balancing act between the two. But first and foremost, the market and the role of chief market officer, to quote Latany Canant from Sixth Sense, and it's in my title. My title is strategy and market. And those are two things, one for the organization, one for the market.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to a CMO last week at Forrester who, when she was hired, she pitched sort of a 3 to 4 year vision of sort of transformation of how marketing operates, how marketing generates revenue in the organization. But she also had brought in Agile as a methodology for doing that, right? And so she was hired, but basically the company was hiring this 3 to 4 year plan, and she still operates in sprints. She still operates in an Agile format. And I think sometimes Agile is used as an excuse for not having a strategy, and here's someone's doing both. And so when I hear you talk about having a vision for where you want to go, but still testing new ideas, Todd, you talk about the Tiger Team approach of sort of still having some urgency to try new things, but having that grounded in where you are going, grounded in a longer term vision of where you're trying to take this.
Yeah. I think I will say there was a model revealed at Forrester. Was it earth-shattering? No, but it was their model around the go-to-market motion of the alignment between sales, marketing, and product supported by technology. And so when George Connolly, and I wanted to call him George Clooney for some reason, but anyway, when George Connolly revealed that, or whoever revealed that big smoke and mirrors kind of thing, I think if your strategy is not grounded in the entire go-to-market motion, and you're just thinking about marketing, then you're going to do a disservice to the buying experience and the enablement processes that have to happen to grow. So to the end of what is the strategy and how do you make that bite size for people to act on? That's part of the role of the chief market officer.
Kerry, I want to ask you this question. I know you weren't at the conference last week, but to Helen's point, CEO Forrester got up on stage and said in his keynote that Google's going away and that websites are going away. And it could have been just a provocative way of sort of shaking us and saying, like, things continue to change. I've seen a lot of people over the last few months, actually, as we get frothy about AI, say, you're better off not chasing the trends and really focusing on the fundamentals, like the psychology of marketing, the way people buy, the way we sort of make decisions rationally and justify emotionally, and sometimes irrationally. Just curious how you're thinking about adopting new technology, adopting new ideas, thinking about the future, but also sort of rooting it in things that are more universal.
Well, I agree, and to the beginning of what I said, great messaging isn't overcome a poor tech stack. Poor tech stack is going to overcome great messaging. There is a balance, and Todd, you said it at the beginning as well. Those fundamentals don't go away, and I do see a lot of mischief. One of my most overused words. Anybody who knows me on the phone is like, oh my gosh, she used the word mischief. But one of the big pieces of mischief is you do get enamored with something, and you you set this expectation. And I'll tell you, I mean, I heart success deeply, but in my own organization, it's like, oh my gosh, this is this great hope, right? Now, I can see all these things. I can see all these moving shapes and actions behind the curtain that I couldn't see before. And eureka, this is going to be wonderful. And here you go, SDRs, AEs, whatever you're handing people over to your demand. And, guess what? You can spend a lot of energy chasing a lot of actions that you can see that don't mean anything, right? You see momentum, but you really need to understand the trigger points of your buyers and really make sure that whatever those actions are, you can really see them. So yeah, sure, you're going to move somebody along the demand generation conveyor belt. Of course you are. You're going to educate people from cold to sold. But there are a lot of trigger points out there, like new hires or promotions or M&A or funding or something, that are really going to turn an ICP to an ICV IP, and you need to be able to jump on those. So there was definitely some refinement in what we learned with ABM, and I think I saw somebody mark in the comments like, "Ooh, ABM is going to be like wonderful," and it got a bit oversold. So, Matt, you got to understand your customers. You need to understand your triggers. Those fundamentals can't go away. Crappy messaging is you're going to lose. But if you do not embrace this stuff, and somebody said skunk works somewhere. I agree. Have a tiger team. Or I think I said skunk works. Tiger team. Have tiger teams. Don't be afraid of this. Let your team not be afraid of it. Give them some time to go off and explore and do a show and tell one so we can look at what could be so they can embrace it and begin to move ahead. So, man, Matt, that was a lot. And I'll stop talking. But wow, what a crazy time to bring all that together and have methodology and not madness. Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah. And I think, Dom, we talked a lot last week about sort of the courage and commitment it takes to do this well, right? I mean, I think have your tiger teams, be agile, try new things, but the companies that are winning, I mean, imagine you're the CMO going, you're being recruited at a tech company and you're being recruited as a CMO, which means there isn't a CMO or the last one didn't cut it or whatever. And you're coming in and they're like, hey, we need to get a pipeline. And you're saying, I got a 3 to 4 year plan, right? I mean, the courage it takes to sort of come in and conviction to sort of say that's, and yet, I see the biggest gap for a lot of companies right now that want to transform their marketing and create more revenue responsible, predictable outcomes is not the playbook, it's the change management. It's the commitment to the change long term to do that well. That is hard right now when a lot of companies are seeing lower conversion rates, longer sales cycles. What are you see? I mean, you see a lot of companies that are making that commitment, that are doing that and getting their board and leadership to do it. Like, what makes them different? You're on mute.
Sorry, hit the mute button. It's a webinar. You still haven't figured it out in the years of virtual work and still working the mute button. So one thing that comes to mind is I think change. I totally agree with you. Super important to move people along, but I find that a root issue behind that even is just everyone's overwhelmed by work. There's never enough resourcing, and everyone knows that. Actually, in some cases, we found organizations where everyone's open to the change. It's not change resistance. It's change capacity. It's the ability to keep the engine running while you're trying to evolve it. And I saw this a lot in the Forrester content, and it didn't have a name, so I'll give it a name. But Todd, I'd love your point of view on this. We see this conundrum where you have no one has enough resources. Everyone has to execute some kind of transformation that's going to provide marketing impact. Very few marketing leaders would say that, yep, the business thinks I'm delivering enough impact and everything's great. So we sort of never have enough resources. We always need more impact, but we need resources to get impact, but we need impact to fund resources. But we need, right now, less resources and more impact, whether resources are people or budget or time or skills or capacity or tech or whatever. We never have enough of what we need. And it's almost like this marketing resource paradox problem that we all know that we have, that we're trying to execute this sort of new pathway and trying to move the organization in a new direction and trying to deliver next level impact. But we're not really talking about that. We sometimes just don't have enough capacity to even change. We're still dealing with all the requests coming in. We're trying to make sales, effective. We're trying to get as many campaigns in market. We're trying to implement the one big piece of technology that we promised the organization we were going to do. And it's almost like this unwinnable math. I'm curious if you've seen that problem in your past, Todd, and how you've thought about wrapping your arms around it and giving some words to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Forrester called it, but I call it the boil the ocean problem. I mean, I think we as marketers are supposed to be able to see around the corner. We have to understand our customers in a way that we can predict how they might make decisions, what they might do, so that we can have a conversation that's relevant around the corner. And so I think that's our general mindset as marketers. Our mindset is to be way ahead of where it might be. So we can also then thus imagine a marketing org and a marketing function and a marketing action and motion that is way more sophisticated than what we currently have the resources for, technology for, internal org for, all those things. So you're 100% right. I think we as marketers tend to kind of look at the entire ocean. So fundamentally, I start with small wins, and frankly, there needs to be so much underlying tech and data and org motions in place for it to work well at scale that there's no point in trying to go to scale fast. So instead, I think it's always about, hey, I'm going to take one little thing, whether that be one little part of the sales org, whether it be one product, whether it be one region, whether it be whatever it is, and get some proof, both for yourself and of course for your other C-suite partners, to say this is what is possible. We did this thing here. We had very measurable, definable goal. Here's what happened. It works. Now we want to do that times 5 or times 2. Take baby steps. And I think that's going to be the same with all of these new tools that are coming in as well. We don't know in the hundreds of iterations of new tech that's coming out right now which ones are going to be long lasting, which ones are going to stick, which ones are not. So baby step all of them. I mean, right now you won't know the froth from the winners. And so you have to kind of play with all of them. And I think the only way to resource step is through proof. I mean, that's what everyone, a lot of people don't know other people's functions. A lot of people in the C-suite don't understand what marketing do. We're the people with the big wizard hats that somehow make magic happen. They don't know how it happens. So I think you just need little pieces of proof and evidence, take little bets, show that it works in very quantified sort of ways, and then ask for ability to repeat and prove the ability to repeat.
I was going to kind of see if I can pivot the conversation by just saying one or two words. And I think that this comes down to trust, right? In terms of you show the art of the possible, you show the context by which you're going to apply it, you get grassroots buy-in, you demonstrate that you've actually delivered those small wins or even big wins, right? And I think this comes back to the conversation that was happening at Forrester around AI, like generative AI was the whole conversation. And, I think it comes back to trust. Will it ever replace all jobs? Will it ever replace all the content? Will it ever replace the ads that are created or the media optimization that you might need to do? I don't think so, because there's still human that needs to be trusted to do some things, whether that's the right prompt, the right media planning, whatever it is, right? But I think, we are a human first business. I don't care what anybody says as a marketer, you're human first, right? You're selling to humans, whether you want to say account or leads or contacts, I don't really care, but you're selling to humans and you're building trust in the messaging and the strategy, and your team is really trusting you with their careers. And my whole philosophy is about resume making moments, right? So how do I give people this line of sight to the art of the possible and inspire them to achieve the greatness that I know is possible and that they have the potential for as part of that trusted factor as well? So that was a lot around trust, and I led into AI, and I'm hoping we're going to go into AI as the next conversation. So
what I love about this conversation so far, and AI is where we'll get deep into that, is that, and we've seen this in the comments as well, we're talking about working on the business, not in the business. And you have to do both, right? But I think on a day-to-day basis, the bigger source of gravity sometimes is to work in the business, right? There's always a fire drill we have to follow. I read somewhere, it was a meme that said, life is basically telling yourself things are going to calm down by next week, every week until you die. And that will always be the case. You have to slow it down yourself, or you have to get yourself above that. Doesn't mean you can't stop executing, right? Yeah. It doesn't mean that CMO can come in and sort of not deliver pipeline for 3 years until she transforms the business. But you have to have those upper level conversations outside sometimes of the stress of the day, of the week, of the quota, to get that alignment you're talking about, Helen. It's hard sometimes to do that.
Really hard. And I think, I also go back to those OKRs or whatever we've set out for the quarter to make sure that we're making the progress to the bigger vision or the bigger strategy as well. And the other thing I do is I share those OKRs across my team. So I have legal ops, rev ops, sales, marketing, BD, and I have 2 selling teams in there. And so I share those OKRs across everybody so that they can see the interdependencies on each other and how we're helping each other to the bigger strategy as well. So it's a lot, but it also gives me a place to go back and check whether we're making the progress that I see we need to make or have envisioned to the board. I think the other part of it is really being transparent where you suck, or where the company sucks in that motion of growth, with the stakeholders at the C-suite as well as with your board. And those are really hard conversations, but we all want the same outcome, which is success for the company.
If I could add on to what Todd and Helen both said, totally agree. That trust, and Todd, you're so right. The wizard hats, right? All this stuff seems to happen automatically, and it is so complicated that if you're not in this every day, it's very difficult to understand what's going on. And I said, it's method, not madness. I saw somebody respond to that, and I really think that's true. And automatically, yes. And so I have definitely found a lot of success in, back to that conveyor belt analogy, when you can explain it very simply to your organization, that from cold to sold, and from marketing to sales, and from awareness and consideration and decision and purchase, here is what that demand generation production line looks like. And here are the people and the processes and the technology that are involved in each step of it. Here's what we're doing. Here's what our plans are. Here's where we suck. Here's what we're going to do. Here's where we have handoffs. It drives a lot of mischief, or it has driven a lot of the mischief, there it is again. See, I told you, out of it, being able to say, look, I can whiteboard this process. It is not magical. There is a lot of revenue generation science here. Here's where it looks like. Here's where our hotspots are. Here's what we're going to fix. And this priority, that has been really, really helpful in so many of the conversations I've had to crystallize it for folks and keep us out of fire drills, because they understand systematically what we're doing. So Matt, the only thing I would say is, oh man, I never got 3 or 4 years to do that.
Yeah, there was one thread through all of this, which I think, and you both touched on it, which is really critical. All of this technology, all of these advancements in the marketing motion is about trying to create a more personal and realistic, almost one-to-one like conversation with our prospects and our current customers. And we're getting better and better at it through every iteration of technology. I think that's why people got so excited about generative. It's like, oh, wow, this get even better at being super one-to-one. But then any of the gaps in our internal org between us and product, and us and sales and product, and all of those gaps, any separation whatsoever, become more stark in the conversation, because the more intimate and personal the conversation comes on one side, the more dramatic it will be that it isn't that when it goes to the other side. So it is also really important that as we're running, to make certain that the entire org is running with us and we're all running on the same page, because that synchronization, that congruity is really critical as we get more and more intimate with our conversations with our customers.
If you walked around the show floor, oh, sorry, Dom, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, integrating those touch points, almost like marketing needs to become expert in how it moves work around the organization, how it collaborates with each other. Like this, it's a science, a systems thinking. It's an operations management job, more than just, getting great messaging out the door. It's like how that stuff gets produced and brought to life. And I talked to lots of CMOs that, we don't have a lot of tooling for that. I think we have so much technology in the world, but like, how do we actually manage our work, and how do we manage the touch points of the work and the integration of the work and the people that are doing the work, and organizing, large groups of diverse people with very different perspectives and KPIs and objectives and functional silos into like produce something magical for the customer that feels like This is for me. This is personalized. I think that's a real next frontier that kind of sits underneath the surface, but doesn't really make it to the headline of the priorities every year.
Which goes back to the Forrester content. There was actually a stream dedicated to revenue operations, which I think is that frontier. And, coming into this job almost 9 months ago, my first hire was RevOps because of the art of the possible and disparate data sources. The first thing I did was I actually participated in an RFP as a contributor, and I watched the Teams message. Let's not debate Teams or Slack, but I watched the messaging back and forth. And we didn't have the value story. B, we didn't have a single point of contact who knew everything about an account or the client or whatever it was. And it's a lot of back and forth. So I'm now looking at do we need an RFP software, right? The answer is yes. We need a content management system that people can use for proposals or whatever, around 30 different products we have. But I think to that end is you have to put yourself in the seats of the people who aren't in your team to understand some of those friction points as well, whether that's a seller picking up a BDR call and doing outbounding, whether that's writing proposals, whether that's getting a contract through signature. Those are friction points in the buying experience and the people that are doing it. And so how do you orchestrate the whole thing from a RevOps perspective, end to end?
All right, so we're all of a sudden halfway through our time here today.
How?
We've covered, I don't know. We've covered a lot. We got a lot of other stuff I want to try to cover. One is this I heard a lot of conversations last week about sort of the complexity of doing B2B go-to-market well today, right? The complexity of the tech stack, the complexity of the buying journey and buying committee, the complexity of integrating all your go-to-market teams, especially sales and marketing together. And whenever we have AI that comes out, or ABM, or event-led, product-led, people-led, I think we're always gravitating towards is there something simpler that I can do? And I think what separates sometimes the most successful companies building predictable outcomes from those that still struggle with random acts is the embrace of the complexity, the acceptance that this is going to be hard, it's going to be complex. We have to figure out a way to do this. We have to figure out a way to make this systematic and make this part of our culture and part of our business, to embrace that, to see better results moving forward. Just curious, Dom and our panelists, kind of how you think about that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you don't have the choice. And I was a CMO before I put on the CEO hat, and I'm sure everyone on the panel would agree that you don't have the choice just not to service a stakeholder because you're too busy, or to just not run that campaign because you don't have enough resources, or just not lead that event. You have to do it. You have to find a way how to do it, and sort of you have organized plans and you have structured programs, but you always have this sort of random stuff as well. I don't know anybody that's really ever got rid of that. And in some ways, maybe that's a good part of being able to be agile and pivot and jump in and be action oriented. But I think that I think it's an operating model evolution that needs to occur that gets good at complexity. That gets good at being able to handle planned demand, unplanned demand, being able to follow best practice processes throughout, being able to really build expertise, but also flexibility and scale into the model, and not have to trade one for the other of stability versus flexibility. And I think getting to a world where complexity is normal. I mean, I think we've all felt like that for the last couple of years. Maybe we felt that we went into a bit of the pandemic period, and then everything was sort of we all had to go to digital. We had to change all our events. We had to shift all of our teams to hybrid, and it never got easy again. Different things that we're working on, but it feels like that tempo is the normal. And Kerry, you've worked in a couple different organizations that have had big transformations, and did it ever get less complex as you scaled?
No, I completely, absolutely agree with you. And you're completely right that the alchemy of your team does need to change to deal with that. As much as I stress that the people that I see most successful as CMOs today are embracing tech along with all the other best practices of marketing, there are people who are better at being a marketing operations mechanic than they are at campaigns. And I really do think you need to look at it as really having specific people who are your marketing operations geniuses and really understand that tech deeply and really have a natural aptitude and patience for those things and want to like dig into the instruction manuals. And that's just fun for them. That's such a different animal sometimes. And you're all laughing because you know what I mean. And the same is true for data. I don't think that the person who is good as marketing ops is necessarily always the best data scientist. Those folks generally have maybe a different appetite for what the data is saying and being able to tease out business intelligence from those and a different level of business acumen. So on marketing ops and that complexity and data, if everybody's name is in the box, nobody's name is in the box. I think they really need to have specific people assigned to those functions who are really, really good at them. And it's not their 10th thing to do. It's their first or second thing to do.
Yeah, related
to
this,
I think,
go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to kind of have a comment there. It was interesting going through my hypergrowth startup phase. My inclination was to just get people to help. And, because you get overwhelmed by the complexity and you quickly just want to add like, oh, who can do that thing as fast as possible? So you just add bodies around as fast as you can that seem to have some knowledge about how to get, the key things done. And it's really important. I mean, that maybe is the right for a certain phase, but you do hit a threshold and where you have to get the leadership of the marketing group in place, because you can quickly start, you're flailing in that complexity for a long time until you get some real owners to say, okay, yes, there will be complexity, but I have a plan for this part of the complexity. That's what I was laughing about your marketing ops comment, because that was one of the things that I added way too late in the thing in the process of kind of hyper growth. And that should have been one of the things I added early. It felt like it at the time, oh, this seems impossible. I won't need that for a long time, but you do need it, because the wave comes at you so quickly and the complexity. So, but then once you have that leadership, having the capacity to flex up and down, or even to move directions, pivot directions, that's a different kind of resourcing. Once you have a good strategy and a good plan and a good foundation in place, that ability to kind of have that organization be able to adjust to changes is a different kind of skill set. But once you have a solid plan, it's much easier to do, to add those resources in that can handle volume and handle pivots and things like that. But without that plan and that structure, it always stays very murky. I was laughing at when Helen said too about RevOps. It was the same thing. RevOps and marketing ops, probably the first two things I would ever do, because nothing else that happens will be captured and understood unless those two things are in place. So you're just wasting information and data without those two things in place.
That's assuming you have good content people first. Sorry.
Well, I come from a world of content, so I kind of bring that in myself. So I cheat there.
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just I just struck by like all these conversations about the, embracing the complexity and sort of trying to do more. And then we've got AI doing certain things. And, a lot of conversations both here and at the conference really reminded me of, Domenic, what you talk about relative to this marketing resource paradox, right? Like who and what is going to do all of this? Like and honestly, like if we're going to replace media as a core part of really the corner of the realm and really go after more data and technology to sort of orchestrate more of those right conversations, it's not a set it and forget it. We need more people and resources to do all of this. So I'd love to have you chat a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of branches into the AI space as well, is where the more capabilities you have at your disposal, I think the more people you need. And I think that there's not a real labor elimination, which is okay, because now we have more capability, we can drive more impact, more demand, more engagement, more prospects, more pipeline, more revenue, more things that the business wants. And George at Forrester called it like the Iron Man moment, where it's not that the robot replaces the human, it's the robot becomes part of the human to drive better results. And I think that's the key here. And
Yep.
I mean, we spend all of our time at 2X providing labor, services, people, humans, brains, bodies, doers, execution to bring marketing to life. And I think it's almost a good thing of like the more success you have in marketing, We've seen this, especially as you go through high growth organizations. We just need pipeline to hit our revenue target, and then the bigger revenue target we have, now the bigger pipeline target we have, now the more marketing we need. And so more marketing begets more marketing. And so I don't believe we're in a place where, as we get really efficient, there's necessarily a reduction in headcount. I think what there is though an adoption of the global labor model, which can result in a reduction of headcount cost. So you do get economies of scale as you start to pick people up from all around the world, and you don't have to have ultra senior people in your organization that are VP levels doing the work, but you have doers that are spread from the global marketplace that can fill in all those execution jobs, and your cost might come down on labor, but your volume of humans goes up. And I think that's a big part of how organizations should be structured and thought of. And there's so much. I'll go back to the AI piece, and Helen, throw it to you because you brought up AI a few times. All the talk around AI is about less people. And I just don't fundamentally agree with that. I think that, sure, if we wanted to do the same level of work today, and now we had AI, we could have less people. But no one wants to do the same level of work. We want to do more work. We want to do more volume, more activity, more personalization, more programs. And there's not enough. There's all this like apocalypse talk about AI, removing all the marketing work. But I think it's a real enabler of the best marketing we've ever seen.
Yeah, I will say, I will jump on that one because I feel like there are jobs that get pushed to the side because we don't have capacity. And one of those that comes to mind is rebranding, new voice, new persona, right? And so you've got all this content on .com, and you've got all your sell sheets, and you got to refresh all that, and you decide not to do all of your website because you're not going to come with a new website and carry all that bad crap with you, and it never had stuff, and it's not in the right voice, and it's ugly, and so on and so forth. And so I think there will be different tasks that will get picked up that have been pushed aside because the capacity wasn't there, or the desire to carry that forward wasn't there. And so that's one application that I'm thinking about as we go through a brand refresh is how do I scale that fast? Can I write the right prompt that has our new brand voice and our brand characteristics and our values written into it that I can plug in and I can run through all of our blogs as an example, right? So we know that that's SEO, blah, blah, blah. So, and which ones are performance. So we know which ones to accelerate fast. Otherwise, I would probably kill 90% of what's on our website, take it to not take it to the website, the new website, right? I think that's one application that people aren't talking about. I do think, though, that a lot of the conversation has been around generative AI, which is creating content. And most of it has been in the text space that we've been talking about. But on the graphic design side, when you think about what we do is we help restaurants with their menus and the regulations and the compliance of responsible drinking for alcohol beverage brands and things like that, having that underbelly of IP attached to the LLMs and all those other things, somebody is going to break the mold of what generative really is in relation to the brand and the legal and fiduciary and all those other compliance things that have to happen out there. But I think the other part of it is that side of it. But I think there are two other pillars in my mind and in the way that we talk about it that support AI. One is workflows and processes. So I mentioned campaign optimization, in-time, in-flight, real-time optimization based on signals like weather, for example. We're already doing some of that stuff. So if you're showing an ad for a car insurance company in Alaska and it's snowing, you show the snow ad. If it's raining in Orlando, you put those in. So that's kind of one thought. And the last one is recommendations. What should you do next in the things that you need to do? Whoever builds that into their applications is going to be the winner in terms of improving the efficiencies in-house as well as the customer experience. There's two sides on that recommendation side.
Yeah, I'm kind of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kerry.
I was just going to add on to all of that. Domenic, I agree with you. Nobody's ever going to say, "Oh, we're doing what we were doing better." Everybody's going to want more. I forget who it was. Maybe Matt was like, "Does any, executive team or board ever say, no, we have enough pipeline. Everybody wants more pipeline, right? So you could do more. Okay, now let's do even more, right?" So I agree. The workload, it doesn't change. The expectations only go forward. And whoever was saying about, technology, you become the robot. Yeah, I think that was you, Domenic. That it's an exoskeleton. Great, right? Don't be afraid of it. It's going to let you jump higher and run faster and lift more. It's wonderful. And Helen, you said, also what's not getting done. Yeah. Then you want to go after all those things. So I completely agree, right? That people are going to want more. It may speed you up, but then people want even more. And it's going to let you get after things that you weren't doing. And I'll go back to Domenic and talk about resources. And I know, Domenic, I've worked with 2X across 2 companies. And one of the best things that it helped me do is to deal with this tech complexity. I brought on all these solutions. I heard a horrifying stat the other day that said almost half of the software as a service licenses that companies pay for go unused. Terrifying, right? So it's a real thing. And so with 2X, I was basically able to have lightning bolts on my fingertips and go get things done that I didn't have somebody to do. And they've got a base of people, the Malaysian team, they're in Kuala Lumpur, that let me say, hey, oh my gosh, I've got this new solution. I don't know how to do it. I don't have anybody on my team that can do it. They're talented, but I need more help. So, lots of companies out there are like 2X. I mean, I'm a huge fan of theirs. But man, that really allowed me to extend myself in a cost-effective way and consume some of the technology with people who already knew how to use it. So that was a huge accelerator for me.
Got about 15 minutes left. I want to give a chance for those who are watching live. I've got a bunch of people that are watching, commenting, trying to bring some of your comments in here as well. So thank you all for that. If you have questions, I don't want Dom asking the questions. This is your chance to ask 3 leading B2B CMOs sort of what they're thinking about here. So I think, Helen, since you were there, we've been talking about what was discussed and debating and sort of thinking about like the different themes at the conference. What was something that wasn't discussed there? What's something that wasn't brought up, wasn't on the agenda, that you're like, this is a big deal right now. Why are we not discussing this as an industry?
Yeah, I think there was a couple of observations is how do you treat buyers in the buying cycle when they're walking the marketplace or they're attending a conference? And there was 2 big ahas for me. One is the event within the event. Both Demand-Based, Zoom Info, and 6 Sense, all 3 of them were like in a row offsite and created experiential moments, whether breakfast, lunches, dinners, parties, whatever it was, and meeting space that allowed them to have more people on site without paying for Forrester tickets. I know Forrester won't be happy with me saying that, but there were a lot more people off site than there were on site having those meetings. And the marketplace where people pay to be sponsors and get their brand logo and recognition out there was smaller than last year. But those people who were working those booths were really focused in on engaging people before, because they got the sponsor list. And some of those emails, those outbound emails, were horrific, like "Yeehaw, giddy up, howdy cowboy, we'll see you in Austin." And knowing your audience is key. But then the experience on the buying side, and I know, look, swag is the bane of every CMO's existence, right? I need more t-shirts, I need whatever. But I think being thoughtful about what impression you want to leave and how you differentiate in the marketplace. If I saw one more person with a pair of socks on their countertop, it was like it was Sock Fest at Nordstrom's. And it wasn't differentiating. So I think, the experience that you deliver in the buying experience represents your brand. And what do you want your brand? How do you want your brand to break out is what I was trying to say in that story.
That goes to the trust comment you said earlier. I think that, we've gotten really used to the digital world and meeting, all of our customers, prospects, partners digitally. But when you get that in-person moment, using it as a moment to create this sort of magical experience. And we can certainly comment on, Forrester's, we're all marketers and we run our own shows and we've had our own conferences and how we do it. But I think it's interesting to just see how someone else does it and to look at, there's this very small moment where you get to make that in-person human impression. And do you do it in the way that's, on brand, that's appropriate to the kind of persona that you sell to, and is really, going to create that moment of trust and confidence that that the individual needs. And I think there's there's always interesting ways to do that. I think we're still getting back on the event expertise. In my view, I guess, is we were pretty good at events in 2019 as an industry, as marketers. And I think as we get back into it, I think we're still getting back to where we were in those pre-years.
I would.
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kerry.
I would agree with you, Dominic, but yes, and I absolutely think that certainly right now, with so many people still working from home temporarily or permanently, and with budgets being constrained because of the unease in the tech market, my experience has been that the people who are back at events are really serious in the buying decision. They're hungry to have a face-to-face conversation. With budgets constrained, generally they're key players because they're not just sending anybody to these events. And these people are serious. So our leads coming out of those events, where if you say on a, 0 to 100 scale, what percentage of the way down the funnel people are, we found less looky-loos and more 60 to 70%ers who were almost, demo request hot people. At the shows for those reasons. But yeah, Sockfest, I'm with you, Helen. If your swag is socks, how clever are you being and how standout are you being? Socks are so 5 years ago. They're pre-pandemic. Come on.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Kerry, there's the looky-loos, I think you called them. Those are the people you want to give socks to. Those people who are further down the funnel on the contract or decision phase, right? Those are the people that you want to make them feel special. So there were VIP gifts hidden in closets, and they were given out very carefully to, I got one from one vendor. I actually got two from the same vendor because I'm so close to signing that it was, is it bribery? No. I just needed a hot coffee mug for my husband, but I'll take the gift. Thank you very much. But you know what I mean? Like it created a memory. I know them, that they know me now as the buyer, not just the signer of the paperwork.
Who'd have thought we'd spend this much time talking about socks as a takeaway from the conference? All right, we had a couple questions here I want to make sure we get to in our last few minutes. Yeah. So this one came out from Michael. Thanks for hanging out with us, Michael. So on the AI train, this idea of personalization versus volume, if you could prioritize one, what would you pick? I'm not sure you have to. I think part of AI is going to allow us to do both. But Todd and Kerry, curious your thoughts on this.
He wants a battle royale. Michael's getting up the battle royale for the last 5 minutes here. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm guessing Kerry will too. I don't think it's either or. I do think a great deal of the work that we've been doing over the last, ABM is all about more personalized. And I think a lot of these AI tools will just make it more and more. But the more personalized you can get about one audience, I think AI adds scale without much cost. I mean, I think that's what a lot of these tools, both, and I think Helen touched on it, it's important that it's not just about the content. Absolutely, we're talking about generative a lot right now, and content is critical, making it personalized, but also then AI around the processes and the operations to make certain it's going out is where then that scale can start to happen. It can be personalized at scale. I think that's the metamorphosis that is happening, the revolution that's happening right now. Suddenly, truly personalized content can go out across the entire TAM. That's the revolution, I think.
I think it's based on signals, and I think that's what we are not talking about. Those are inputs to AI, right? And I think one of the things that there are all these prompt engineers who are certified prompt engineers in AI, and it's only really been around for 6 months. Like, how do you get that resume making moment? I don't know. But to me, the piece that we're not talking about enough is the signals, or are the signals that go into that personalization at scale, and how you solve for them, and where do you get the signals from? Some of them will come from your own tech. Some will come from other places, like weather, for example. Foot traffic. Those are kinds of things that we think about, given who our customers are. But getting the ability to get those signals and then use those signals for those, what we would call merge fields in the past, is really what AI is, and people need to think about.
Helen, I totally agree. I agree with both of you. I do think it is both. I think it's scale on personalization and scale on mass. And in personalizations, yeah, Helen, I mentioned triggers, know your triggers, but in a good way, not in a bad way, of, buying M&A, this and that. When I can personalize that and be an immediate action, that's just gold versus somebody to have to, Etsy handcraft that. It's impossible to scale. But then, there are also nurturing streams that I'm dying to go do. I know, I've got a vertical in, manufacturing for people who are in pharma. It's like, oh my gosh, of the 17,000 things I need to do, I need to go build a 6 email string with all the content that wraps around it. When I can get that, 80% of the way there with AI, and then to 20% is the fine tuning that makes it ours. Phew, that's awesome. Can't wait.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. The art of the possible goes back to that.
Exactly. Well, we got
Michael, not as much fight as you expected.
Oh, sorry, Michael.
Michael didn't get the fight he was hoping for.
No, we didn't. It wasn't as controversial that you wanted, but that's okay. All right, well, let's do. We got 5 minutes. Let's do hot takes. We've been talking about sort of the opportunities. We see the challenges. We see the imperatives. We see if we're going to no longer be doing socks at conferences moving forward. Helen wants a auto warming mug for her husband. What's something that you don't want to see, or not, maybe something that you hope to see between now and the end of the year? Something either that you want to see as an innovation in the industry, something you want to see as a trend that more B2B marketing orgs pick up on.
I'll start on that. I want to see the paradox of resourcing and not enough of it and not enough impact being talked about in some of the big trends in the market. Every time I read top 5 trends in marketing, it's AI, it's tech, it's optimizing our program dollars. It's not about like changing the way we use humans and how we scale talent in the org. I think that's a conversation we have to have.
Yeah, I got there was actually a chat earlier quite a bit earlier about will AI start to kick in and actually help automate some of the marketing ops reporting and running the plumbing and pipes of marketing ops. And there's some announcements maybe by Salesforce and others. And I think probably many saw the CTOs of HubSpot's kind of demonstration of where HubSpot was going in terms of its integration. And I think that's my hope is what is the next 6-9 months in terms of some of the AI tooling for building the insights that we as leaders need to run our org. Because I a lot of companies I know are working on that, and it's one of the most complex and hairy parts of the job is kind of getting that plumbing really right, because all the data is coming from different places. You don't really understand the triggers. So to be able to have that in a much more kind of that generative era of that side of the process will be really terrific.
I'll take it from a different angle. I think it's the wild, wild west on the AI side. And I think Matt, you and I we were talking about it, which was does the AI outsmart itself and kill itself in the long run, right? And I think that was a post or a meme yesterday. I think there has to be government involvement, as much as I hate saying that, but I do think that we need regulations and guidance and guide rails, and we need to find where that third rail is so we can avoid it in terms of where the boundaries of PII, GDPR, all those kinds of things are in play. And I think if we don't get that, we run the risk of diminishing society more so than some of the social media platforms are being accused of. And so, not to be Debbie Downer, but I think we as a group of people need to be the advocates for guardrails against AI.
I think it's all good feedback. I think 2 things. I just would round this up. One, I get a little tired of hearing from marketing leaders that tell me that they don't have the resources or budget to do what Dominic's talking about and sort of invest in the resources to execute on this more complex MarTech stack. Yet those state companies are spending $250,000 a month on paid search, right? With very little accountability other than just the marketing and more clicks, more likes that makes everyone feel good. I think there's a rip off the Band-Aid moment that's got to happen, back to our conversations about courage and commitment, to really reflect on what's working, what's not, what's really driving revenue impact for the business, and redeploy resources in the right place. And then the other piece that I think was a little bit talked about at the conference was this sort of idea of the ecosystems, right? Like not just addressing sort of partner sales and marketing at the transactional point, but really thinking not only about the full buying journey, but the entire ecosystem of partners and vendors that surround your customers that can provide value and preference, and well before someone's ready to buy, that can drive greater predictability and more cost effectiveness of your pipeline moving forward. So as always, guys, there's a lot to talk about here. We can keep going for a while, but we probably got to let people get back to work. Thank you all for being part of this. Dom, it was fun to put this together with you and your team. Lots of stuff to talk about. I'm sure we'll have another conference and another sort of post-conference panel coming up. But Kerry, Todd, and Helen, thank you so much for being part of this.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.